Brooklyn husband's temporary temptation. Torn between a fling and family. Can a successful Brooklyn husband resist the temptation of a fleeting romance? A story about the call that changed his destiny. Before we get into this juicy tale, make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon so you don't miss any future videos. Welcome back to Will I Be Happy, the channel where we dive into inspiring stories of love and secrets. I'm your host, and this is a tale that will captivate your heart. Meet Kevin, a dedicated husband and successful real estate agent in Brooklyn. When an enigmatic young lady enters his life for a one-time fling, his world is thrown into turmoil. Her presence challenges his commitment to his family and forces him to confront his deepest desires. Will Kevin stay true to his family, or will he succumb to the allure of a steamy romance? Get ready for a story of love, guilt, and difficult choices that will leave you reflecting on your own journey to happiness. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's dive into this compelling story together. Picture yourself a large floor-to-ceiling window in a chic Brooklyn apartment, just perfect for a modern family. Kevin Brown stood in front of it, gazing out at the city skyline as the sun began to set. The warm hues of orange and pink reflected off the glass buildings, casting a soft glow into the living room. At 35, Kevin had carved out a successful career in real estate, effortlessly navigating New York's fast-paced property market with his innate charm and sharp expertise. Tall and athletic, with sandy brown hair and piercing blue eyes, he carried an air of confidence that drew people in. Behind him, the sound of laughter echoed from the kitchen. Helen, his wife, was preparing dinner while their two sons, Kyle and Riley, chased each other around the island. Helen moved with an effortless grace, each step measured and poised. 33 years old, with long auburn hair that cascaded over her shoulders and emerald green eyes that held a depth of emotion. Her slender frame moved effortlessly as she managed the controlled chaos of their home. "Kevin, could you help me for a second?" Helen called out, a hint of playfulness in her voice. He turned away from the window, smiling at the sight of his family. "Anything for you," he replied, walking over to her. As he approached, Helen looked up at him, a smudge of flour on her cheek. "Mind stirring the sauce while I get these two washed up?" "Consider it done," he said, leaning in to kiss her softly. Their lips met, a familiar warmth passing between them. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. "Ew, gross," Kyle exclaimed, giggling as he pulled Riley along. "Mom and Dad are kissing again." Helen laughed, her eyes never leaving Kevin's. "Can't help it if your dad is irresistible." Kevin winked at her. "Hear that, boys? Your mom thinks I'm pretty great." "Come on, you two," Helen said, ushering the kids toward the bathroom. "Let's get those hands clean before dinner." As they disappeared down the hallway, Kevin stirred the sauce, the rich aroma filling the kitchen. He glanced at a photo on the countertop, him and Helen on their wedding day, her head resting on his shoulder, both of them beaming with joy. Yet lately, he sensed a distance growing between them, subtle but undeniable. Moments later, Helen returned, wiping her hands on a towel. "They'll be back any second, probably dirtier than before," she sighed. Kevin chuckled. "They're energetic, that's for sure." She leaned against the counter next to him. "How was work?" "Busy, as always," he replied. "But I closed the deal on the Thompson property." "That's great," she said, her smile genuine but tinged with something else. Was it hesitation? He noticed. "Everything okay?" Helen looked down, folding the towel nervously. "Yeah, I've been thinking. We haven't spent much time together lately, just the two of us." He reached out, lifting her chin gently so her eyes met his. "I know. I'm sorry. Things have been hectic." She placed her hand over his. "I miss you, that's all." He sighed softly. "I miss you too. How about we plan a date night? Just us." Her face brightened. "I'd love that." Just then, Kyle and Riley burst back into the kitchen, laughter erupting as they nearly collided with their parents. "Careful, you two!" Kevin said, scooping up Riley and spinning him around. The toddler squealed with delight. Dinner was a lively affair, filled with stories from kindergarten and messy attempts at eating spaghetti. After tucking the boys into bed, Kevin found Helen sitting on the couch, a book in her lap, but her gaze distant. He sat beside her. "Penny for your thoughts?" She looked at him, a soft smile playing on her lips. "Just thinking about how fast they're growing up." He put his arm around her, pulling her close. "Tell me about it. Feels like yesterday we were bringing Kyle home from the hospital." She rested her head on his shoulder. "Do you ever wonder if this is it? If this is enough?" He frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She hesitated. I sometimes feel like I'm holding you back. That maybe you wanted more than this?" He cupped her face in his hands. "You are the most important part of my life. Don't ever doubt that." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. "I needed to hear that." He kissed her forehead. "How about we make that date night happen this weekend?" She smiled. "It's a date." The next day, Kevin arrived at the basketball court for their weekly game. The familiar sounds of sneakers squeaking and balls bouncing echoed in the gym. Kobe Lockhart was already there, stretching. Tall and muscular, Kobe had a commanding presence, his dark skin glistening under the fluorescent lights. "Look who finally decided to show up," Kobe teased as Kevin approached. "You're one to talk," Kevin shot back. "I seem to recall someone missing last week's game." Kobe laughed. "Mimi had me on lockdown. Anniversary plans." Donnie Mannheim sauntered in next, his hair tousled and a mischievous grin on his face. "Gentlemen, ready to be schooled?" "Only if you're teaching us how to lose," Kevin retorted. Stevie Cannon jogged onto the court, his youthful energy contagious. "All right, old-timers, let's see if you can keep up." After an intense game filled with friendly banter and competitive spirits, the group collapsed on the benches, catching their breath. "Man, we need to do this more often," Donnie said between gulps of water. "Agreed," Kobe nodded. "But maybe next time let's grab a drink after. Feels like ages since we've hung out off the court." Stevie's eyes lit up. "Actually, how about tomorrow night? There's a new bar that just opened downtown." Kevin wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Tomorrow night?" "Yeah," Stevie confirmed. "Since we all have the weekend free, it'd be the perfect time." Donnie clapped Kevin on the back. "Come on, Kev. You in?" Kevin hesitated. "I don't know, guys. I should probably check with Helen first." Kobe gave him a reassuring smile. "Makes sense. Let us know." "Will do," Kevin said, though a part of him already felt the impending tension. That evening, Kevin returned home to find Helen in the kitchen, humming softly as she prepared dinner. The soft glow of the setting sun illuminated her, casting a halo around her silhouette. "Something smells amazing," he remarked, stepping behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned into him. "Just trying a new recipe." He kissed her cheek. "I'm sure it'll be fantastic." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "How was the game?" "Great. We won, of course," he said with a playful wink. "Of course," she echoed, smiling. He took a deep breath. "The guys are planning to go out tomorrow night. They invited me to join them." Her smile faded slightly. "Oh. I wanted to run it by you first," he continued. "We were planning that date night, but I can reschedule with them if you'd prefer." She glanced away briefly before meeting his gaze again. "No, it's fine. We can have our date night another time." "Are you sure?" he asked, searching her eyes. "Yes," she nodded, though her tone was hesitant. "You haven't had a night out with them in a while. You should go." He studied her face, noticing the subtle tension. "I don't want you to feel like I'm choosing them over you." She forced a small smile. "I appreciate that, but really it's okay. We'll plan something special for next weekend." He leaned in to kiss her softly. "Thank you." Dinner that night was quieter than usual. The usual lively chatter was replaced with brief exchanges, both of them lost in their thoughts. After putting the boys to bed, Kevin found Helen on the balcony, gazing out at the city lights. "Mind if I join you?" he asked softly. She glanced over her shoulder. "Of course not." He stepped beside her, the two of them enveloped in the gentle hum of the city below. "I feel like something's bothering you," he began. She sighed, wrapping her arms around herself. "I guess I just miss you. Between work, the kids, and everything else, it's like we hardly have time for us. He reached out to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear. I know, I feel it too. She looked up at him, her eyes reflecting vulnerability. Do you ever feel like we're drifting apart? He shook his head. No, but I do think we need to make more time for each other. She nodded slowly. Maybe you're right. He took her hand, squeezing it gently. How about we set aside one night a week, just for us? She smiled softly. I'd like that. The following evening, Kevin prepared to meet his friends. He dressed casually but smartly, opting for a crisp shirt and dark jeans. Helen watched him from the doorway of their bedroom. Heading out? She asked, her tone light yet tinged with something he couldn't quite place. Yeah, he replied, turning to face her. You sure you're okay with this? She offered a small smile. Yes, Kevin. Go have fun with your friends. He walked over to her, placing his hands on her hips. I'll make it up to you. She rested her hands on his chest. Just come back to me. He kissed her softly. Always. As he left the apartment, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease. He hoped a night out would clear his mind. The bar was buzzing with energy, a popular spot that had recently opened downtown. Dim lighting, modern decor, and an eclectic mix of patrons gave it a lively atmosphere. Over here! Stevie waved from a corner table. Kevin joined his friends, the camaraderie immediately lifting his spirits. Glad you could make it, Donnie said, handing him a drink. Wouldn't miss it, Kevin replied, taking a sip. They spent the evening reminiscing about old times, sharing stories and laughs. The hours slipped by amidst clinking glasses and shared jokes. At one point, Kevin excused himself to get some fresh air. Stepping outside, he took a deep breath, the cool night air refreshing. As he re-entered the bar, his gaze drifted across the room. Near the end of the bar stood a woman who caught his eye. She was striking, tall with flowing dark hair and an elegant presence that set her apart from the crowd. Dressed in a stylish outfit that accentuated her figure, she exuded confidence. Their eyes met briefly. She offered a subtle, enigmatic smile before turning back to her drink. Kevin felt a strange pull, a curiosity that piqued his interest. He shook his head slightly, reminding himself of his commitments. Returning to his table, he found the conversation had shifted. Thinking of calling it a night soon, Kobe said. Early morning tomorrow. Same here, Kevin agreed, though his thoughts were elsewhere. As they settled their tab and prepared to leave, Kevin cast one last glance toward the bar. The woman was gone. Outside, they parted ways with promises to meet up again soon. Walking home, Kevin replayed the brief encounter in his mind. There was no harm in noticing someone, he reasoned. Yet, he couldn't deny the subtle impact it had on him. Reaching his apartment building, he paused before entering. He looked up at the windows, lights softly glowing behind the curtains. His home, his life, everything that mattered was inside. Taking a deep breath, he headed up. A week had passed since Kevin's night out with his friends, but the image of the mysterious woman at the bar lingered in his mind like a faded photograph refusing to be discarded. He hadn't mentioned her to Helen, or anyone else for that matter, but every so often, her enigmatic smile would surface in his thoughts. It was Friday afternoon when Stevie poked his head into Kevin's office. Hey man, wrapping up soon? Stevie was Kevin's close friend and business partner, sharing both professional ambitions and personal camaraderie. Kevin looked up from the stack of papers on his desk. Just finishing the Henderson proposal. Why, what's up? Thought we could celebrate closing the Thompson deal. Stevie grinned. Donnie and Kobe are joining us for happy hour at the Silver Lantern. We've been grinding non-stop. Time to unwind a bit. Kevin considered this. Helen had mentioned taking the boys to her mother's for dinner. Maybe a quick drink wouldn't hurt. All right, count me in. The Silver Lantern was bustling with the end-of-week crowd. The warm wooden interiors and soft amber lighting provided a cozy respite from the chilly autumn air outside. Kevin spotted Kobe and Donnie at a high table near the back, laughing over something on Donnie's phone. There he is! Donnie exclaimed as Kevin and Stevie approached, We were starting to think you'd bailed on us." "Wouldn't miss it," Kevin said, pulling up a stool. They ordered a round of drinks, and soon the conversation flowed effortlessly, from humorous client stories to lighthearted jabs about each other's basketball skills. "So, Kevin," Donnie began with a sly grin, "any crazy clients this week?" Kevin chuckled. "Nothing too wild, though I did have someone insist that a west-facing apartment was actually east-facing because of their internal compass." Kobe laughed. "Gotta love the city dwellers and their quirks." Stevie chimed in. "Speaking of clients, we got an inquiry today about a potential commercial property development near the waterfront." "Really?" Kevin raised an eyebrow. "I thought that area was tied up with zoning issues." "Looks like the city's pushing some new initiatives," Stevie explained. "Could be a big opportunity for us." Kevin nodded thoughtfully. "We'll have to look into it first thing Monday." As Stevie delved into the specifics of the potential deal, Kevin tried to stay focused, but a movement across the room caught his eye. There she was, the woman from the bar last week. She stood near the entrance, scanning the room as if searching for someone. Dressed in a tailored navy blazer over a sleek blouse and jeans, she exuded both professionalism and effortless style. Donnie noticed Kevin's gaze. Well, what do we have here?" he smirked. Kevin snapped back to the conversation. "What?" Donnie followed his line of sight. "Looks like someone's caught your eye." "It's nothing," Kevin said dismissively. "Just thought I recognized someone." Donnie raised an eyebrow. "Nothing, huh? Watch and learn." He slid off his stool, straightening his shirt. "Donnie, don't," Kevin began, but it was too late. Stevie chuckled. "This should be interesting." Kobe shook his head. "That man never learns." They watched as Donnie approached the woman, confidence oozing from his every step. He engaged her in conversation, but within moments, she shook her head politely, offering a courteous smile before turning away. Donnie returned to the table, feigning nonchalance. "Her loss," he shrugged. Kobe laughed. "Shot down again?" "She must not appreciate genuine charm," Donnie quipped, taking a sip of his drink. Kevin couldn't help but feel a mix of amusement and curiosity. There was something intriguing about her, an allure that was hard to ignore. Minutes later, as Kevin made his way to the bar to order another round, he found himself standing beside her. "Twice in 1 week," she remarked without looking at him. He turned to her, surprised. "Excuse me?" She glanced up, her eyes a captivating shade of hazel. "We were at the same bar last weekend, weren't we?" He nodded. "I thought you looked familiar." She extended her hand. "Margot Elliott." "Kevin Brown," he replied, shaking her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. "So, Kevin Brown," she began, "what brings you to the Silver Lantern?" "Just celebrating a closed deal with my business partner and some friends," he said, nodding towards his table where Stevie was engaged in animated conversation with Kobe and Donnie. "How about you?" "Networking," Margot replied smoothly. "I recently moved to the city and I'm making the rounds." "Welcome to New York," he smiled. "What line of work are you in?" "Real estate," she said, her eyes studying his reaction. He raised his eyebrows. "Really? Small world? My partner and I run a firm here in the city." She smiled. "Seems like fate. Are you open to discussing potential collaborations?" He hesitated. "We're always interested in new opportunities." "Great," she said, her smile widening. "Perhaps we could set up a meeting to explore possibilities." Before he could respond, Stevie appeared beside him. "Everything all right over here?" "Yes, sorry," Kevin said, realizing he'd been engrossed in conversation. "Stevie, this is Margot. She's new to the city and works in real estate." Stevie extended his hand. "Stevie Cannon. Nice to meet a fellow industry professional." "Likewise," Margot said politely. "Well, we should get back," Stevie said, giving Kevin a subtle nod. "Of course," Kevin agreed. He turned to Margot. "It was nice meeting you." "Same here," she replied, handing him a sleek business card. "Feel free to reach out." "I will," he said, slipping the card into his pocket. As they returned to the table, Donnie eyed Kevin suspiciously. "What was that all about?" "Just networking," Kevin replied casually. Stevie glanced at him. "She seems ambitious." "Nothing wrong with that," Kobe remarked. Kevin checked his watch. I should probably get going. Already? Donnie exclaimed. The night's just getting started. Kevin checked his watch. Yeah, but I've got an early morning, he said, grabbing his jacket. Stevie smirked. What's the rush, Kev? Got a curfew? Kevin chuckled lightly. Just don't want to be a zombie tomorrow. Busy day ahead. As he was about to leave, Margot approached the table, a subtle smile playing on her lips. Leaving so soon? She asked, her gaze fixed on Kevin. Donnie raised an eyebrow, glancing between Kevin and Margot. Well, since you're here, why don't you join us for a drink? Margot tilted her head, her eyes never leaving Kevin's. I'd like that, if Kevin doesn't mind staying a bit longer. Stevie nudged Kevin playfully. Come on, one more round won't hurt. Kevin glanced at Kobe, who gave him a cautious look. I really should— Sit down, man, Donnie interrupted, pulling out a chair for Margot. The night's young. Feeling the group's eyes on him, Kevin reluctantly sat back down. All right, but just one more. That's the spirit, Stevie cheered, signaling the waiter for another round. As they settled in, Margot took the seat next to Kevin, her leg brushing lightly against his under the table. He shifted uncomfortably, aware of her proximity. So, Margot, Donnie began with a sly grin, what brings you to our lovely establishment tonight? She smiled gracefully. Just exploring the city, getting to know the local spots, and I'm glad I did. Stevie leaned forward. And how do you know our friend Kevin here? We've crossed paths professionally, she replied, her eyes flickering toward Kevin, though I'm hoping to get to know him better. Kobe cleared his throat. Kevin's quite the family man. Is that so? Margot asked, her tone light but probing. Married with 2 kids, Kobe affirmed, giving Kevin a pointed look. Margot's smile didn't waver. A devoted husband and father, admirable. Donnie chuckled. He's the poster boy for domestic bliss. Kevin forced a laugh. All right, enough about me. Stevie raised his glass. To new friends and unexpected meetings? They all clinked glasses, but Kevin couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Margot's presence was both alluring and disconcerting. As the conversation continued, she subtly steered topics toward shared interests with Kevin, occasionally touching his arm lightly when making a point. Each time he felt a jolt, a mix of attraction and guilt. Kobe observed quietly, finally interjecting. Kevin, didn't you say you had an early morning? He stood up, gently pulling away. Yeah, I really need to head out. Let me walk you to the door, she offered, standing as well. Donnie and Stevie exchanged amused glances, while Kobe watched with concern. Outside the bar, the cool night air was a relief. Kevin turned to Margot. Thanks for the company tonight. She stepped closer, her eyes meeting his. The pleasure was mine. Perhaps we can continue our conversation another time. He nodded politely. Perhaps. We'll be in touch regarding the business collaboration. She smiled slyly. I was thinking something more personal. Before he could respond, she leaned in, her lips grazing his cheek near the corner of his mouth. The unexpected intimacy caught him off guard. Margot, She placed a finger over his lips. Shh, no need to explain. She pulled back, her gaze lingering. Good night, Kevin. With that, she turned and walked back into the bar. Kevin stood there, his heart pounding. He needed to clear his head. Deciding to use the restroom before heading home, he re-entered the bar but avoided his friends, making his way directly to the back. He splashed cold water on his face, gripping the edges of the sink. What am I doing? He muttered. The door opened and he looked up, expecting to see another patron. Instead, Margot stood in the doorway, her expression unreadable. This is the men's room, he said, a mix of surprise and anxiety. She locked the door behind her. I know. He took a step back. This isn't appropriate. She advanced slowly. I think there's something between us, Kevin. Something worth exploring. I'm not asking for forever, just one night. He felt a surge of conflicting emotions. The temptation was palpable, but so was the weight of his commitments. I can't. She leaned in, her lips mere inches from his. Are you sure? His mind flashed images of Helen, of Kyle and Riley, of the life they shared. Gathering his resolve, He gently but firmly took her hand and moved it away. "Yes, I'm sure." A flicker of disappointment crossed her face before she masked it with a cool smile. "Very well. I admire your conviction." He exhaled, relief mixing with lingering tension. "I should go. Thanks for the company tonight." She stepped closer, her eyes meeting his. "The pleasure was mine. Perhaps we can continue our conversation elsewhere." He hesitated. "I don't think that's a good idea." She smiled softly. "Just a nightcap at a place nearby. No pressure." Before he could respond, his phone buzzed in his pocket. Grateful for the distraction, he pulled it out to see Helen's name on the screen. "Excuse me, I need to take this," he said, stepping a few paces away. He answered the call. "Hello?" "Hi, it's me." Helen's voice came through, sounding both warm and a bit concerned. "What's up, baby?" "I'm sorry," Kevin said quickly, glancing back at Margot, who was watching him intently. "Listen, I'm going to be late tonight, so don't stay up and wait for me, okay?" There was a brief pause. "Where are you?" Helen asked. "Wait, say that again," he said, feigning a bad connection. "You're dropping out. Kevin, I can hear you fine. I asked where you are." He lowered his voice. "My battery is low. Just wanted to let you know we're going to a place nearby." "Who's we?" she questioned, suspicion creeping into her tone. "Just me and the guys," he lied. "Gotta go." "Kevin, wait." He ended the call abruptly, his heart pounding. The weight of what he was doing settled heavily on his shoulders. Margot approached him, a knowing look in her eyes. "Everything all right?" "Yeah," he replied, forcing a smile. "Shall we?" She extended her arm, and after a moment's hesitation, he took it. As they walked down the street, the city lights blurred around him. Kevin's mind was a whirl of conflicting emotions: guilt, excitement, fear. They arrived at a quiet, upscale lounge. Inside, the atmosphere was intimate, with soft jazz playing and dim lighting casting warm shadows. They found a secluded booth in the corner. Margot ordered them drinks, her demeanor confident and relaxed. "To new experiences," she toasted, clinking her glass lightly against his. "You seem tense. Relax." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's been a long day." She placed her hand over his. "Let me help you unwind." He looked at her, torn between his desires and his conscience. "Margot, I don't know if I can do this." She tilted her head. "Why not? We're both adults. No one has to know." "But I would know," he said softly. She traced her fingers along his hand. "Sometimes it's okay to live in the moment." He pulled his hand back gently. "I think I made a mistake coming here." She regarded him for a moment, then nodded. "I understand. If you need to go, I won't stop you." He stood up, reaching for his jacket. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," she said with a faint smile. "The offer stands any time." As he left the lounge, he pulled out his phone and dialed Helen again. She answered immediately. "Kevin?" "Listen, baby, I'm sorry," he began, his voice filled with regret. "Just wanted to tell you, don't worry. I will be late. Don't stay up and wait for me." There was a pause. "Kevin, what's going on? You sound strange." "Say again? You're dropping out," he said, mimicking static. "My battery is low." "Kevin, I can hear you just fine. Please talk to me." "Just so you know, we're going to a place nearby. Gotta go," he said hurriedly. "Kevin, wait." Kevin hung up, his hands shaking. He knew he was digging himself deeper, but he couldn't face Helen, not like this. The weight of his deceit pressed heavily upon him as he stood on the dimly lit sidewalk, the city's nightlife bustling around him. Lost in his thoughts, he didn't notice Margot approaching until she was standing right in front of him. "Hey," she said softly, her eyes reflecting the glow of the streetlights. "Everything all right?" He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "It's been a long night." She studied him for a moment. "I have a place nearby. Would you like to come over? Just to talk?" He hesitated, the rational part of his mind telling him to decline. "I should say no," he thought. "Someone's waiting for me." But the combination of the evening's tension, the allure of Margot's presence, and his own inner turmoil clouded his judgment. Maybe just for a little while, he found himself saying. She offered a reassuring smile. Come on, it's just around the corner. They walked together in silence, the sounds of the city fading into the background. Her apartment was modern and elegantly furnished, with large windows overlooking the skyline. Make yourself at home, she said, slipping off her jacket. Can I get you something to drink? Water would be fine, he replied, suddenly feeling out of place. She returned with 2 glasses, handing one to him. 2 unexpected encounters, she toasted. He clinked his glass against hers. To new friends. They sat on the sofa, a comfortable distance between them. At first, conversation flowed easily, shared stories of their careers, ambitions, and the challenges of the city. Margot had a way of making him feel at ease, her attention genuine and her laughter infectious. As the minutes turned into hours, the atmosphere shifted. The space between them diminished, subtle touches and lingering glances hinting at a deeper connection. Kevin, she said softly, placing a hand on his arm, I'm glad you decided to come over. He looked into her eyes, conflicted emotions swirling within him. I shouldn't be here, he murmured. I have a wife, a family. She nodded slowly. I understand, and I don't want to complicate things for you. He appreciated her words, but the magnetic pull between them was undeniable. Maybe I should go, he said, though his body language betrayed his hesitation. Margot reached out, her fingers lightly grazing his hand. If that's what you want. He felt a spark at her touch, a reminder of emotions he'd long suppressed. I don't know what I want, he admitted quietly. She moved a little closer. Sometimes it's okay to not have all the answers. He looked down at their hands, her fingers intertwined with his. This feels complicated. Life often is, she whispered. He met her gaze again, and in that moment, the world seemed to fade away. Without fully realizing it, he leaned in. Their lips met softly, a tentative connection that sent a rush through his entire body. She pulled back slightly, searching his eyes. Are you sure about this? He hesitated, thoughts of Helen and his children flashing through his mind. But the immediate warmth of Margot's presence overshadowed his reservations. No, he whispered, but I don't want to stop. She nodded, accepting his conflicted response. They shared another kiss, deeper this time, emotions intensifying. The barriers he'd maintained began to crumble. They moved with a quiet urgency, each step charged with unspoken desire, navigating the uncharted territory that lay between them. Margot led him toward the bedroom, her movements fluid and purposeful, every stride a silent agreement to leave the bustling city life of Brooklyn behind and surrender to the moment. As they passed the large window, the twinkling lights of the Brooklyn skyline blurred into a soft glow, casting a romantic ambiance over the room. The sounds of honking taxis and distant chatter faded, replaced by the intimate whispers of their approaching connection. Kevin reached out, his fingers gently tracing the curve of her back, feeling the warmth of her body respond to his touch. The air between them was thick with anticipation, every breath they took drawing them closer together. Margot's eyes sparkled with a mix of longing and vulnerability, reflecting the intensity of the emotions swirling within her. They approached the bed with a shared magnetic pull, the soft glow of the room casting shadows that danced around them. The coolness of the sheets contrasted with the warmth of their bodies as they sank onto them, their movements becoming a harmonious blend of tenderness and passion. Kevin leaned in, capturing her lips with his in a slow, deliberate kiss that deepened with each passing second. The taste of her mingled with his, igniting a fire that burned deep within him. Margot responded eagerly, her hands sliding up his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath his tailored shirt. Their movements were guided by a shared impulse, a dance of intimacy that felt both inevitable and exhilarating. Kevin's hands explored the contours of Margot's body, every touch igniting sparks that sent shivers down her spine. She pressed herself closer, her body melding perfectly with his, the sensation heightening their mutual desire. As they moved together, the room seemed to fade into oblivion, The only sounds, the soft whispers of their names and the rhythmic beating of their hearts. The connection between them was both fierce and tender, a delicate balance of passion and vulnerability that left them breathless. Kevin guided Margot onto her back, the cool sheets a stark contrast to the heat building between them. He paused for a moment, their eyes locking in a silent understanding before continuing their intimate dance. With each touch and every sigh, the boundaries between them dissolved, their souls intertwining in a dance as old as time. The city lights of Brooklyn twinkled softly outside the window, casting a serene glow over the room as they lost themselves in each other. Every moment was a mix of passion and contemplation, the allure of the forbidden intertwined with the reality of the life Kevin was betraying. Later, as they lay side by side, the aftermath of their passion enveloped them in a heavy, comforting silence. Kevin stared blankly at the ceiling, a knot forming in his stomach as reality began to settle in. The warmth of Margot beside him was both soothing and tormenting, a constant reminder of the choices he had made and the consequences that awaited. The room was filled with the soft sounds of their breathing, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing inside Kevin, leaving him to grapple with the weight of his actions and the uncertain path that lay ahead. The city lights of Brooklyn continued to shimmer outside the window, a silent witness to the emotional storm unfolding within. Kevin's mind raced with conflicting emotions, desire, guilt, and the looming weight of his commitments. As he gazed at the shimmering skyline, he realized that the path ahead was fraught with difficult decisions, each one shaping the future of his life and the lives of those he loved. Reality was setting in. "I should go," he said softly. Margot turned to face him. "You can stay if you want." He shook his head. "I can't." She reached out to touch his cheek. "I understand." He sat up, beginning to gather his clothes. "This shouldn't have happened." "Maybe not," she replied, sitting up as well. "But it did." Fully dressed, he stood by the doorway, hesitating. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," she said, offering a faint smile. "Take care of yourself, Kevin." "You too," he replied before quietly leaving the apartment. Outside, the city was beginning to wind down, the streets less crowded. He checked his phone. Missed calls and texts from Helen filled the screen. His heart ached with guilt. He dialed her number, bracing himself. "Kev," she answered, her voice filled with concern. "Where have you been? I've been worried sick." "I'm sorry," he said, his voice strained. Things got complicated tonight." "What's going on?" she pressed. "Are you okay?" He took a deep breath. "I'm coming home. We can talk then." "Please be careful," she said softly. "I love you." "I love you too," he replied, the words heavy with remorse. As he began the journey home, Kevin grappled with the reality of his actions. He'd crossed a line that couldn't be undone, and the path forward was uncertain. Entering his apartment, he found Helen waiting in the living room, her eyes reflecting a mix of relief and worry. "You're finally home," she said, standing up. "Yeah," he replied, unable to meet her gaze. She approached him cautiously. "What's going on? You look distant." He swallowed hard, emotions swirling. "Kevin," she began softly, "you've been so distant lately. Is everything okay?" He took a deep breath, forcing himself to maintain composure. "Yeah, everything's fine. Just work has been really stressful lately." She nodded slowly, but the concern in her eyes remained. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here." He smiled weakly. "I know. Thanks, Helen." A few days later, the tension between Kevin and Helen had only grown thicker. Unable to bear the emotional strain, Kevin sought solace in his best friend, Kobe. They met at their usual spot in the basketball court, the familiar sound of bouncing balls offering a semblance of normalcy. "I need to talk to you about something," his voice tinged with desperation. Kobe dribbled a few times before stopping and turning to face him fully. "What's going on, man?" Taking a deep breath, Kevin confessed. "After I left the bar, I ran into Margot again. We spent the night together." Kobe's expression shifted from concern to shock. "Kev, are you serious?" Feeling the weight of his confession, Kevin looked away, uncertain of how to proceed. Before Kobe could respond, Donnie approached them, having overheard the last part of the conversation while grabbing a drink from the bar. Donnie leaned against the railing, a mischievous grin playing on his lips. "Well, well, Kev. Looks like you've got yourself in a bit of a pickle." Kevin sighed, rubbing his temples. "Yeah, something like that." Donnie chuckled, his eyes gleaming with sly amusement. "You know, man, life's too short to be stuck in a rut. If you're feeling like you need something else, who am I to judge? Sometimes you just gotta go for it." Kevin glanced up, a mix of frustration and temptation in his eyes. "It's not that simple, Donnie. I love Helen." Donnie shrugged nonchalantly, leaning closer. "Love's complicated, but so is keeping everything the same forever. If you're not happy, maybe a little excitement isn't the worst thing. Just make sure you know what you're doing." He gave Kevin a knowing wink before walking away, leaving Kevin to ponder his words. "I messed up," Kevin admitted, his eyes downcast. "I shouldn't have done it. I can't keep living like this." Kobe placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You made a mistake, but you need to fix this. Have you thought about telling Helen?" "I don't know if I can," Kevin replied quickly. "She'll never forgive me. I'm afraid of losing her and our family." Kobe sighed deeply. "Keeping this secret will only make things worse. It's eating you from the inside, that she's not by your side just because you made that call and lied." Kevin felt the truth in Kobe's words resonate deeply. "I know," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. "But how do I even start?" Kobe looked him in the eye. "Start by being honest. It's the only way to move forward, no matter how hard it is." A few days passed, each one heavier than the last. Kevin found himself unable to concentrate at work, his mind constantly replaying the events of that night with Margot. The absence of Helen by his side felt like a physical ache, a constant reminder of his betrayal. He avoided eye contact with her, choosing to stay late at the office under the guise of work. The guilt was becoming unbearable. One evening, as the sun set and the city lights began to twinkle, Kevin sat alone in his study, the room quiet except for the distant sounds of traffic. He knew he couldn't keep living this way. Deciding he needed to confront his feelings, Kevin reached out to Kobe once more. They met at a secluded spot in the park, away from the noise and distractions of the city. "Kobe," Kevin began, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can't do this anymore. The guilt is consuming me." Kobe nodded sympathetically. "I understand. What are you going to do?" Kevin looked down, his hands trembling slightly. "I'm about to tell Helen the truth. I need to face the consequences of my actions." Kobe gave him a supportive smile. "That's the right thing to do, man. It won't be easy, but honesty is the first step toward healing." The following morning, Kevin felt a mix of anxiety and determination. He sat at the kitchen table, Helen preparing breakfast, her movements graceful and unaware of the storm brewing inside him. "Kev," Helen called softly, "are you okay? You seem even more distant than usual." He forced a smile, trying to mask his turmoil. "Yeah, just tired. Didn't sleep well last night." She glanced at him, concern evident in her eyes. "Is there something you want to talk about?" He shook his head gently. "No, really. Everything's fine." As Helen went about her morning, Kevin felt the weight of his actions pressing down on him. He knew that maintaining the facade was tearing him apart from within. The distance between him and Helen was palpable, a chasm filled with secrets and lies. That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Kevin found himself alone in the living room, the silence amplifying his internal struggle. He stared blankly at the coffee table, the photo of his family mocking him with their smiles. The guilt was overwhelming, eating away at him from the inside. He had to make a decision. The path forward was unclear, but he knew that continuing to hide would only lead to more pain. Kevin took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he was about to do. He knew that confessing to Helen was the only way to begin healing, but the fear of losing everything was paralyzing. As he sat there, the reality of his actions settled in, and he realized that the time to face the truth had finally come. "Helen," he called. Thank you for joining us on Kevin's heart-wrenching journey of love, temptation, and self-discovery. His story leaves us wondering, will he find the courage to confess to Helen and rebuild his family? Or will he let his secrets keep him apart from those he loves most? What do you think happened next? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Share your interpretations in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Will I Be Happy for more inspiring stories that touch the heart. Until next time, remember, sometimes the answers are yours to decide.